Good morning. If I could ask the fine officers to come forward and stand to my right. From the Gaithersburg Police Department, Officer Chris Leach. From the Montgomery County Police Department, Sergeant Robert Lumsden, Officer Matthew Stoikas, Andrew Ingalls, and Officer Amy Crone, if you could come forward, please. And also, I'd like to recognize Officer Leach's wife, who's here today, Beth. Thank you for being here, and thank you for all that you have done in caring for Chris during his lengthy recovery. Beth's a nurse, and she took off work today to be here for her husband to show support for him as she has throughout his recovery. So, Beth, thank you very much for being here. On March 15th of this year at approximately 9:22 p.m., Officer Chris Leach responded to a dispute call in the 400 block of Christopher Avenue in Gaithersburg. The original call involved an ongoing dispute between two juveniles. The parents of both juveniles had contacted each other and were meeting in an attempt to mediate and resolve the earlier dispute involving their two juveniles. So the parents are coming together to try to mediate this dispute between their two children. While they're doing that, an altercation ensues and the police are called. Officer Leach is the first officer to respond. The officers, along with Officer Nathan Provost, these two officers were speaking with one of the juveniles on the front landing inside the apartment building entrance with their back to the glass entryway door. The second juvenile approached the building from the outside. Upon both juveniles seeing one another, one youth charged the other, and Officer Leach ordered him to stop. The youth continued running toward his intended victim when Officer Leach stood in front of the victim in an effort to protect him. The youth did not stop and ran forcefully into Officer Leach. Both fell into and through the glass panel at the front of the building, causing the glass to shatter. The shattered glass severely lacerated Officer Leach and his assailant. Officer Leach suffered a deep laceration from broken glass to his lower back and was bleeding profusely. He also had other injuries to include a deep laceration to his right wrist and cuts on both hands. The assailant was also injured and was bleeding heavily. Once Officer Leach realized that he was injured, he advised Officer Nathan Provost of this, and Officer Provost immediately got on the radio, put out a signal 13, advised that there was an officer down, and requested a fire rescue response. Officer Provost pulled Officer Leach away from the broken glass by grabbing his outer vest carrier, and then immediately instructed a bystander to get some towels, which he used to apply pressure to the wound until additional units arrived to assist in rendering first aid to Officer Leach. Montgomery County Police Sergeant Robert Lumsden was one of the first officers on the scene and recognized the potentially life-threatening severity of Officer Leach's injuries. His knowledge, training, and quick thinking played a significant role in the effective administration of first aid. Sergeant Lumsden and Montgomery County Police Officer Matt Stoikas retrieved the necessary first aid supplies and were able to control the bleeding using trauma dressings. Their calm and meticulous execution of first aid ensured that essential treatment was provided to Officer Leach on the scene. Fire rescue and trauma personnel at Suburban Hospital commented upon the superb quality of care that was provided to Officer Leach. Before Sergeant Lumsden and Officer Stoikas could get into a position to provide first aid to Officer Leach, the immediate scene needed to be stabilized, and the assailant, who was also seriously injured, needed to be removed. Montgomery County Police Officer Andrew Ingalls recognized this need and without hesitation grabbed the assailant and removed him from the immediate area. This was in spite of the fact that there was a lot of blood potentially subjecting Officer Ingalls to blood-borne pathogen exposure, and the urgency of the situation didn't afford him the opportunity to use protective measures. Despite the fact that every officer's instinct was to assist their fellow injured officer, Officer Ingalls, Officer Provost, and Officer Amy Crone recognized that the assailant also required emergency first aid. They rendered appropriate aid to the assailant and ensured that he was properly delivered to fire rescue personnel and ultimately to the appropriate trauma care unit at Suburban Hospital. Many other officers assisted in one way or another, either at the scene or during the escort of the ambulance to Suburban Hospital. Officers from both the Rockville and Bethesda districts closed intersections approaching Suburban Hospital in order to facilitate the rapid transport of Officer Leach to the hospital to receive the trauma care that he needed. The actions of these officers were crucial to stabilizing Officer Leach until fire rescue personnel arrived. Congratulations to each of these officers on receiving the Distinguished Service Citation.